The announcement came just before the end of cycle chime, buzzing through the Interspecies Academy's PA system like a poorly translated war declaration. Biological Field Study Extension. Professor Shvar's voice echoed through the lecture hall. All students will bring a predatory life form from their homeworld to next week's xenobiology class. Live specimen only. No holograms, simulations, or neural scans. We are studying behavior, real behavior, not rendered data. That is all. The moment the chime rang, the room erupted like a caged ecosystem. Predators? Exclaimed Bernag, a towering slate-scaled student from Vif Corps Prime. He rattled his dorsal spines in anticipation. My father's bloodhound Talon Beast will take up half the room. It has 2 mouths and thinks in sonar. My Vrylock melts bone with its breath. Zelev chimed smugly. A shimmering blur of angles and fins, Zelev wore scent plumes of entitlement and projected a smugness that nearly required shielding. Ank, a smaller Trakeli student, covered in copper fur and always clutching an inhaler-sized moisture capsule, gasped. Does it have to be fully grown? Mine just finished molting. It still spits acid, but the venom sacs haven't matured. Near the back, a single hand rose, distinctly 5-fingered. So like any predator? Said Jason. Heads turned, appendages shifted. A brief silence lapsed. Professor Shvar blinked one eye at a time, his outer eyelid flickering. Yes, Jason. Any predator your species has legally domesticated or can safely contain for a classroom demonstration. Jason nodded, made a quick note in his terminal, then leaned back without further question. He seemed neither excited nor intimidated, just thoughtful. The professor's eye lingered on him for a second longer than necessary. Arrival day dawned to a chorus of security klaxons and emergency duct ceilings. Students paraded into Lecture Hall E with mobile stasis fields, reinforced cages, and bio-locked containment orbs. The room thrummed with growls, shrieks, and the low mechanical thrum of powered restraints. A vent near the ceiling hissed ominously as it struggled to filter the cocktail of territorial pheromones and predator musk. A Zithal student arrived, riding on top of her offering, a sprawling arachnoid predator with crystal-tipped fangs and dozens of mirrored eyes. It clung to the ceiling and chittered at any movement. Bernag's Talon Beast, as promised, required 3 station guards and a floating wall to shepherd it in. It bared rows of jagged, mismatched teeth, and had already eaten one of the Academy's decorative ferns. Ank, nervous as ever, clutched a temperature-controlled crate, pulsing with yellow heat stripes. He's not venomous yet, Ank whispered to anyone listening. But his screams caused temporary neurological resets in 4 species. Jason wasn't late, but he waited. He stood just outside the door while the chaos swelled within, one arm cradling something wrapped in a worn gray hoodie. As a Slivex student accidentally triggered a bladed pheromone burst from her predator's defensive sac, Jason walked in, calm as a librarian during an earthquake. The room quieted by degrees. In his arms, nestled lazily against his chest, was a small creature with short fur, twitching ears, and eyes that blinked with deliberate disinterest. It stretched once, daintily, then yawned with such grand apathy it bordered on performance art. Jason looked around and nodded once. Hey. Silence. The cat orange, soft, unimpressed, flicked its tail once and stared directly at the Talon Beast, then promptly licked its paw and began cleaning itself. Professor Shvar, who had been repositioning a tranquilizer field, stared. What? The professor finally said. Is that? Jason blinked. Oh, this is Pumpkin. The professor paused. Pumpkin is the name of the creature or a designation of its classification. She's a domestic cat, Jason said. Phyllis catus. She's also a predator, small game specialist, boredom hunter, apex in most suburban ecosystems. Zelev began to chitter an unfortunate cross between laughter and musical derision. That is your predator? That fluffy prey sponge? She would be swallowed by my Vrylock as an amuse-bouche. Pumpkin, as if on cue, glanced at Zelev. Then she blinked slowly, tucked her paws under her chest, and went still. You brought a napping rodent to a predator showcase, Bernag snorted. She's not napping, Jason said mildly. She's calculating. A soft flutter interrupted the rising sneers. From across the room, A winged insect part of another student's ecological predator display had escaped its containment and was zipping wildly through the air. Pumpkin didn't move. Not at first. Then, like a switch flipping, she tensed. Her body lowered, shoulders shifting forward in a silent glide, ears flattened, pupils dilated. She became, in less than a breath, something alien. The insect darted left. Pumpkin leapt. There was no warning, no hiss, no growl, just pure, silent motion. Her front paw swiped out, claws flashing just enough to snag the insect mid-flight. She dropped, flipped, and pinned it beneath one paw, tail flicking. Crunch. The room froze. Jason crouched beside her. See, she doesn't do it for food. She's full. Did it for fun. She does that a lot. Professor Schwar's eye ridges stiffened. You mean this predator, this Felis catus, kills recreationally? She practices, Jason said. She'll toy with stuff sometimes, bat it around. Sometimes she pretends not to see it, then goes in with a precision strike. Is it trained? Barely listens, Jason admitted. She understands words, but chooses when to obey. Her decision matrix is hard to pin down. Zeleve, now visibly rattled, scoffed again. That was one insect. My Vrylock consumed a juvenile Grark beast on the way here. Jason nodded. Sure, but did it know that the Grark was trying to blend in with your seat harness? Did it figure out the movement pattern, predict a line of flight, then strike from a still position within 2 seconds? Pumpkin stretched again and trotted, completely ignoring the professor, onto his desk. She sat. Then, without breaking eye contact with anyone, raised a paw and knocked a datapad to the floor. The crash echoed. Pumpkin blinked, knocked another one. This, Jason said, is part of her dominance routine. Establishes territory, picks high ground, shows contempt for order. She understands social hierarchy? The professor asked faintly. She enforces it, Jason said, even on humans. Pumpkin turned her gaze on the Talon beast. The creature growled softly. Pumpkin stared. And stared. The Talon beast, inexplicably, turned away. Pumpkin blinked once and curled into a loaf on the professor's desk. She slept. No one spoke. By the time the class ended, there were no jokes. Not anymore. The cat had moved twice more, once to shred a piece of synth plastic packaging with alarming efficiency, and once to disappear behind the wall paneling and reappear from a ceiling vent just to prove she could. Jason answered a few more questions, mostly about diet and scratch-resistant furniture, but the air had changed. Bernag eyed Pumpkin from a distance, no longer boasting. Zelev's Vrylock was trembling inside its containment globe. As the students filed out, whispering, the professor remained at his desk, eyes locked on the feline, now curled beside his datapad, like an emblem of subtle menace. Jason picked her up gently, hoodie outstretched. Pumpkin stretched one last time, nuzzled into his chest, and promptly began purring. The professor exhaled. And the human wasn't even afraid of it. It wasn't until the Academy's AI-managed surveillance network flagged 3 separate breaches in secure ventilation grids that the administration decided to intervene. By then, the Xenobiology Department had already filed a risk evaluation. The subject, Pumpkin, species, Felis catus, Earth origin, currently residing in dormitory 3C17 with human student, Jason Reeves. The report included thermal stills of the feline balancing atop a 10-foot light fixture, a video feed of her pressing her entire body into a space clearly 40% smaller than her measured mass, and one image where she had apparently duplicated herself until someone realized the second cat was a reflection in polished aluminum. The AI system flagged it as a potential visual mimic, recommending Level 2 lockdown. Security requested a full genome breakdown. Jason submitted a sticker of a cartoon cat saying, "Nope," and a sticky note reading, "She bites if you try to scan her." Which was true. Dr. Ivash, head of containment, now wore a gauze dressing around her third appendage and hadn't stopped twitching since the incident. Xenobiology class resumed 1 week later. Students filed in with a new air of caution. Several had replaced their predators with tamer specimens, herbivores, even. Zelev brought a biomodel of a Vrylock instead, citing travel stress and subquantum allergies. Bernog's talon beast was absent. He offered no explanation but sat 2 seats farther from Jason than usual. Jason arrived late this time. Pumpkin arrived first. She had, somehow, entered the room through an upper vent, dropped soundlessly onto the professor's lectern, and begun grooming before the class even noticed her. Jason strolled in 5 minutes later, holding coffee and wearing a lopsided grin. "Sorry," he said. She insisted on leading. Professor Shavar stood rigid. "Jason Reeves, did you receive the updated class guidelines?" "Yeah," Jason said, sipping. "No free-roaming predators, no unsanctioned hunting, no desk climbing." He pointed to Pumpkin. "She's only breaking 2 of those right now." Pumpkin chose that exact moment to roll onto her side and expose her belly, an invitation that had lured more than one unwitting fool into bloody retribution. No one moved. The lesson that day was predatory instinct versus domestication, coexistence or contradiction. Shvar lectured with the stiff cadence of someone hoping not to draw attention from the apex predator on his desk. Now, species domestication typically diminishes natural instincts. The more adapted to symbiotic living a predator becomes, the less it hunts for pleasure. Statistically, Pumpkin sneezed. Statistically, the professor tried again, pleasure-based killing is inefficient and maladaptive. Jason raised a finger. "You might want to amend that. Cats haven't needed to hunt for food in human society for over 4,000 years. They still do. Like, obsessively." "You've removed the evolutionary incentive," the professor said. "Why persist?" Jason shrugged. "Instincts hardwired. Also, they're bored. A cat stuck indoors for too long will start treating shadows like prey. Mine once hunted a laser pointer dot for 36 minutes straight." Bernog lifted a trembling claw. "What happens if it catches the red dot?" "Nothing," Jason said. "She realizes it's fake, then stares at me like I'm the idiot." "Does it punish you?" asked Ankh, swallowing nervously. Jason considered. "Passive-aggressively, yeah. I usually wake up with her sitting on my chest, staring at me. One time, she knocked a glass off my shelf every 4 minutes until I got up." A screen displayed images of cats stalking prey, climbing vertical walls, fitting into impossible spaces, and manipulating door handles. The last clip showed a cat dragging an entire cooked chicken off a counter while maintaining eye contact with the camera. "Why," the professor asked, "do humans keep these things in your homes?" Jason hesitated. "Well, they're cute, soft, make weird chirping noises when they're watching birds out the window." "You cohabitate with apex hunters for comfort?" Jason blinked. "Sure. I mean, they don't see us as prey. Usually." "Usually?" Pumpkin blinked. Jason scratched her ears. She purred. "She's never attacked me, just everyone else." That afternoon, the class conducted a predator behavior simulation. Each student was assigned a virtual habitat with interactive holograms and tasked with predicting their predator's reactions to unfamiliar stimuli. Pumpkin was excluded from the sim. "Her reactions are erratic," the professor explained. Jason offered, "I could just let her walk around and you guys can record the carnage." They declined. Instead, the class reviewed footage from Pumpkin's unsanctioned dorm room escapades. Clip 1. She hunts a holographic butterfly. It vanishes. She searches for 15 minutes, then ambushes a bedsheet. Clip 2. She squeezes through a gap under a door, disappears for an hour, then returns carrying a glove from someone else's room. Clip 3. She stares directly into the hallway camera for 12 minutes, unmoving. No one knows why. A quiet fell over the class. "She has no pack," the professor murmured. "No hive mind, no shared consciousness or genetic memory. She's one small, isolated predator, and yet—" "She knows," Jason said. "Knows what?" Jason pointed to the final frame of clip 3. Pumpkin's eyes glowed faintly in the infrared, reflecting the hallway lights. "She knows she's being watched, and she doesn't care." During a short break, Ankh approached Jason near the hydration spout, fidgeting with his moisture capsule. How did your species first decide to live with them?" Jason grinned. "It's a long story. Ancient humans figured out that cats were good at controlling pests. Mice, rats, bugs, so they gave them food. Cats stuck around. Ankh tilted his head. They accepted subservience for food? No, Jason laughed. We accepted theirs. They chose us. We've been trying to live up to their expectations ever since. Ankh blinked. But humans dominate their world. Jason sipped his water. And cats dominate their households. From across the room, Pumpkin knocked over the professor's water globe. After class, the students filed out with considerably less noise than usual. Many walked backward down the hall, keeping their eyes on the feline still perched on the desk. Pumpkin yawned again and began grooming her side, completely unconcerned. Professor Shvar began typing up the updated curriculum for the Predator unit. He paused, tapped his notes, then sighed. New addendum. Predation cannot be measured by size, strength, or volume of destruction. True apex status lies in indifference, in unflinching calculation, in killing without need, and resting without apology. Crazy. He paused again. Then added, consider replacement of current predator metric. Incorporate psychological threat. Felis catus to be flagged as Class S red under behavioral hazard codes. He looked up just as Jason passed, nodding politely. Pumpkin purred in his arms. Kuli's way, and the human carries it. By the third week, security protocols at the Interspecies Academy had been quietly but thoroughly revised. Pumpkin now had her own ID badge. It was scanned without complaint by the outer security door system each morning as she sauntered in ahead of Jason. No leash, no crate, no containment field. Just a laminated card on a soft red collar that read, Authorized Predator, do not engage. To be clear, Jason still had to show his badge, log his biometrics, and pass through the scent screen. But Pumpkin? She strolled past all of it, with the bureaucratic immunity of a diplomat and the composure of a queen. Some students suspected she had memorized the retinal scanner's rhythm. Others suspected she had blackmail on the building. Jason had learned to stop explaining her. He tried once early in the week when the Glavik supply transport pilot had to emergency land because of unexplained scratching noises in his cockpit's wall panel. Turned out Pumpkin had followed Jason to the hangar and explored the ventilation system for 5 hours. When confronted, she simply exited the dashboard, stepped delicately across the pilot's display console, sat down, and started grooming her left paw. The pilot was later found muttering something about anti-gravity in her eyes and took voluntary leave for species-based anxiety. Jason tried apologizing. Genuinely. He explained that Pumpkin wasn't dangerous to large beings, had no venom, and wasn't territorial in the traditional sense. Then what is she? The pilot asked, still pale. Jason hesitated. She's a concept. That Friday, the Xenobiology department was scheduled to host an open demonstration for visiting scholars from 3 different planetary unions. It was a prestigious event, full of academic grandeur and multi-species politicking. Each student would introduce their predator, present research on its behavior, and demonstrate handling techniques. The professor pulled Jason aside 2 hours before the event. Jason Reeves, I must ask, is there any way you could ensure your predator remains stationary during the presentation? Jason considered. I could ask her. I'm not certain she recognizes your authority. She recognizes it, Jason said. She just doesn't care. Would a harness? Have you ever tried putting a harness on a cat? Professor Shvar's eyelids flickered rapidly. Jason leaned closer. Last time I tried, I lost a sock, a chunk of calf, and most of my dignity. I see, Shvar said softly. The demonstration hall was a repurposed docking chamber, fitted with observation tiers and shielded arenas. Predators from across the galaxy sat in containment spheres or paced within custom habitats. Holo displays detailed their ecological roles, feeding habits, and behavioral quirks. Pumpkin lay on a folded towel at Jason's table. Her presentation placard read, Species, Felis catus. Common name, domestic cat. Predatory classification, stealth. Diet, carnivore, opportunistic. Hunting purpose, recreational, territorial, philosophical. She was asleep. Jason stood beside her in uniform, datapad in hand, scanning the increasingly confused expressions of the visiting scholars. He cleared his throat. I know what this looks like, he said. Small, harmless, Lazy. Pumpkin opened one eye, sneezed, and went back to sleep. But she is, undeniably, a predator. Not because she dominates a food chain with brute force, not because she has venom or claws that drip acid, but because she doesn't need any of that to rule her environment. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jason continued, "You won't see violence from her today. She has no reason. But if a rodent wandered across this stage right now, she'd wake, pounce, and kill it before you blinked. Not for food. Not for defense. But because it moved." An alien scholar from the Valtry Accord raised a tentacle. "But this is pathological, compulsive, psychologically unstable. Why do you allow such a being near your sleeping quarters?" Jason smiled. "Because we trust her." Another ripple. "Why?" He paused. "Because trust, for humans, isn't always logical. Sometimes we build bonds with things that could hurt us because we see something in them. A reflection, a challenge. A companionship made stronger by the fact that it's not guaranteed." The hall went quiet. Then, Pumpkin woke. She rose slowly, stretched long and low, and hopped off the table. The scholars collectively tensed. She strolled between displays, utterly ignoring the various hissing, blinking, and growling creatures in containment. She stopped at the Glavic razor beast, a quadrupedal brute with 10 eyes and hydraulic mandible jaws. It growled. Pumpkin sat, stared, and didn't blink. The razor beast whimpered and turned away. Someone gasped. Pumpkin trotted over to a pile of pamphlets, knocked exactly one onto the floor, and returned to her towel. Later, as the event wrapped up, the scholars filed out in subdued contemplation. Some muttered to their aides. Others glanced warily at their own predators, suddenly unsure about previously accepted safety metrics. One scholar from the Kirith Dominion approached Jason. "I do not understand," he said slowly, "why such a creature would choose to live among you." Jason watched Pumpkin curl into a ball. "Because," he said, "we're weird, and so is she." That night, Professor Shavar added a new subsection to the predator classification system. Note: the concept of predation must be expanded to include psychological dominance, behavioral manipulation, and existential unpredictability. Felis Catus exhibits all of these. Caution advised. He paused, then added, "Unclear if the creature is intelligent or simply plays dumb better than we play smart." As he turned to shut down his terminal, he spotted a shadow under his desk. 2 glowing eyes blinked at him. Pumpkin. She'd followed him home. She yawned, stepped into his office, and knocked over a cup of styluses. Then lay down. The professor swallowed, unsure whether to move. Jason's words echoed in his mind. "She doesn't see us as prey, usually." By the 4th week, the Interspecies Academy had formally added Pumpkin to its staff directory under Honorary Ambulatory Exhibit, Xenobiology Department. Her official duties were unclear. So were her boundaries. Security personnel learned to scan under chairs before sitting. Students checked their bags for claw holes. The maintenance drones began reporting unusual detours, entire floor sectors rerouted, so as not to disturb her naps in sunbeams. One instructor requested that the small predator please stop glaring at me while I lecture. The request was denied on the grounds that the predator's attendance was voluntary and constitutionally protected under Earth-Human-Animal companionship clauses. Pumpkin had become, unintentionally, a campus legend. Jason was not. He was still just a student mid-tier grades, decent lab work, punctual if not particularly driven. But wherever he walked, eyes followed. Not because he stood out, but because the thing in his arms, or trailing behind him like a self-satisfied ghost, did. And with each passing day, something shifted. Less ridicule, more wariness. Less laughter, more notes. By now, entire study groups were devoted to feline behavioral theory. One campus club launched a Coexistence with Ambivalent Apex Predators awareness campaign. They printed shirts. Jason refused one. "Feels weird," he said. "Wearing merch about your cat while she's watching you." He wasn't wrong. The incident that solidified Pumpkin's status occurred appropriately during a mandatory safety drill. A simulated decompression alarm sent most of the student body into organized chaos. Classrooms sealed, lights dimmed, and a pre-recorded AI voice calmly announced, "This is not a test," which was a lie, and everyone knew it. Except the visiting Bartel, a crystalline species newly admitted to the Academy's educational exchange program. The Bartel did not understand simulated. When the alarms triggered, one of them panicked and shattered its own emergency containment orb, triggering a cascading failure that dropped the entire xenobiology wing's quarantine shields. In most circumstances, this would have led to chaos. It still did. Just not from the predators. Most were trained, sedated, monitored. All but one. Pumpkin had no leash, no tranquilizer chip, no monitoring collar. And yet, when a Vrexian spiral lurker slipped free of its crate and began pulsing toward the rear stairwell, no one screamed. Because Pumpkin was already in motion. The security footage showed it all. She launched from a table edge, paws silent as thought, landing 5 feet ahead of the creature. Tail stiff, posture predatory. She didn't hiss. Didn't growl. She just stood there. Unmoving. Staring. The spiral lurker hesitated. Then reversed. Security later noted the creature refused to leave its crate for 72 hours, even with coaxing. It burrowed into its own thermal lining and emitted a low, keening hum, something only observed in post-traumatic specimens. Pumpkin, meanwhile, took a nap in the evacuation locker. The incident prompted an emergency faculty meeting. Professor Shaver, flanked by 3 members of the Risk Analysis Board, presented footage, transcripts, and an increasingly grim behavioral profile. "She broke no rules," the professor said. "But she's predictably unpredictable," argued the Dean of Interspecies Ethics. Jason sat across the room, arms crossed. "She prevented a containment breach," he said. "Would you rather she hadn't?" "That's not the point," someone muttered. "She's dangerous," said another. Jason looked at them. "She weighs 9 pounds. "Exactly." Pumpkin, lying in a sunbeam near the door, flicked an ear. The room fell silent. Weeks passed. Pumpkin's legend grew. Zelev no longer brought predator models to class. Bernog started feeding stray animals in the courtyard, muttering something about karmic insurance. Ank took up knitting, claimed it helped him feel safe. Jason began receiving requests from professors in other departments. Could Pumpkin visit the psychology lab, the diplomacy program, the physics wing? He declined most of them. "She's not a research object," he said. "She's herself." "Then what is she?" asked the professor one afternoon, leaning against his desk while Pumpkin dozed beside him. Jason tilted his head. "She's a reminder." "Of what?" "That power doesn't have to be loud, that control doesn't require force, that something can be small, quiet, and soft, and still make apex predators back down." He scratched behind Pumpkin's ear. "She's proof that cohabiting with danger isn't always reckless. Sometimes it teaches us respect. Sometimes it teaches us boundaries." Pumpkin yawned. Graduation came late that season. Jason walked the stage like everyone else. No fanfare, just a diploma and a slightly wrinkled gown. Pumpkin was not invited. She came anyway. Sat at the edge of the amphitheater. Watched the whole ceremony. Knocked over 2 chairs. Later, she wandered off. Professor Shavar remained behind, walking the campus paths in the late hours. He passed the xenobiology labs, now quieter, the predator enclosures mostly emptied for summer hiatus. He paused near a window. Inside, on the sill, Pumpkin lay curled in a tight spiral, asleep. A maintenance drone hovered nearby, quietly rerouting itself. The professor watched her for a long moment, then opened his datapad. Final entry, Predator Unit Curriculum Revision. A predator is not always a growl, a claw, a venom sac. Sometimes it is a gaze that does not blink, a presence that shifts the behavior of others without threat or sound. He hesitated. Then added, "Sometimes the greatest danger is not being hunted, but being understood and dismissed. The cat does not roar, it waits." He looked back once more. The cat stretched. And the human? He had gone home. But the predator had stayed. And the academy, every corridor, every ceiling vent, every trembling freshman had changed to accommodate her. That, the professor thought, was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all.